Hello. Yes. Hi. Then it's quite unfamiliar to sit here in my office and to welcome all of you to our session 14 towards the citizen social science methodology. And I want to give you a view to my screen. A second, please. Sorry. So this one, yeah. Okay. So that's the introduction to session 14. No, what happens here now? I'm sorry about this, but so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit lost. So now introduction is here. I just want to read from my computer here. So it's something that freeze here.
It seems to.
Hello?
No one can say hello. Yeah.
Hello, yes.
Hello. We can hear you.
Yes, something with freeze here, so I'm totally confused. I'm sorry about this. So I need my introduction here, so I can't find it here anymore on my computer. Okay. So I hopefully it is set now. So I'm back here. So I had a really tough problems with my computer. But I wanted to introduce you to the session 14 towards the citizen social science. The session is called Citizen Social Science, and maybe some of you were not really aware about the social in the title. But for us as social scientists, a major challenge of citizen science is to further explore the potentials to strengthen research methods and methodologies in the area of social sciences. My personal science background is in qualitative and participatory research methods, and as the University of Applied Science Potsdam, we participate in the project COACT. And I briefly want to present our approach to social science here that we apply in the project COACT. So COACT, that's the name for co-designing citizen social science for qualitative action. The research project funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 research project, and that's a project where we worked together and universities, different citizen groups in whole Europe and in Argentina. And our approach to citizen social science is that people come with a topic, with a theme, and that we invite the citizens as co-researchers to participate in the research project. Important for us is that their own concern, their own research topics, their own interest in topics. They do not only participate in the research project, but they can always to come up with outcomes and to distribute, to disseminate outcomes. And the approach is to build up knowledge coalitions around for research topics. So on the one side, or first we have the University of Barcelona, who works together with different citizen groups on mental health care. Then we have a citizen social science group on youth employment that works in Vietnam. Then we have research in Buenos Aires, and we want to approach the topic gender equality by inviting different engaged in gender equality topics, and then we want to invite them to conduct together with our support their research through whole Europe. So that is a very brief introduction into the COACT project as one approach to elaborate on citizen social science. And besides these 4 research actions, our interest is to build a methodological toolkit and to invent new forms of co-evaluation, a co-evaluation with the citizens to evaluate the collaborative conducted research projects. So next is that I want to come back to our session here. We have in this session 4 quality contributions for further develop and expand the discussion of social citizen science into new territories. And I just want to introduce into the 4 papers and want to introduce the presenters of these papers because of technical reasons, because it's always complicated to switch between different presenters. I do it now in the beginning for all the 4 papers. I start with the paper Participatory Knowledge Production, the Transformative Potential for Environmental Justice, the case of Mantanasa Riachuelo River Basin in Buenos Aires, Argentina, that is presented by Debora Swistun, Valeria Arza, and Guillermina Actis. So Debora Swistun, she holds a PhD in social anthropology, is associate professor of environmental humanities at the National University of Avellaneda. Neda and the National University of San Martin in Argentina. She's interested in Tol's experiences on interdisciplinary participatory processes, and she collaborates with FAN, that's a group, citizen group that works on environment and natural resource foundation. Then another co-presenter is Valeria Arza. She's a senior researcher in science, technology, and innovation policy at the National Science and Technical Research Council, with workplace for the transformation of the National University of San Martin. And she is an associate professor in Buenos Aires, and Guillermina Actis as a PhD student at the Research Center for Transformation of the National University of San Martin. These are the presenters of the first paper. The second paper is New Boundaries of Ethical Boundary Work and Citizen Science, that's presented by Kasperowski and Niclas Hagen. Kasperowski is Associate Professor of Theory of Science at the University of Gothenburg, and Niclas Hagen is a researcher in Theory of Science at the University of Gothenburg. Then we have another paper that's Citizen Science and Artificial Intelligence, Communication, Culture and Ethics, presented by Niels Gommesen. He's a lecturer at the Department of Communication and Arts at the Scheller University. And finally, and that will be the first paper because of technical reasons, so that we don't have to switch between all the presenters, is that I want to present together with David Scheller 7 principles for citizen social science, the research firm as a foundation for a participatory approach. Okay, it feels a little bit awkward to sit here in my office and there's no one to who I can listen, but I hope that you are all present there in front of the computer. And so now it's Debora and Guillermina. So you want to present now your paper, yeah? Okay, then I will present mine at the end of the whole session. Okay, so you are welcome here, and I'm quite excited to hear about your project. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan.
Okay, can you see our screen?
No yet, Guillermina.
Okay, there.
Now I think it's going on.
Okay, so hello everyone, I'm Guillermina and I will be presenting our current working paper with Debora Swistun. We're both working in the COACT global project, specifically in the research and innovation action in Buenos Aires. Before presenting the advances of this working paper, we would like to provide you with some context of the work we are doing. This work is part of the research and innovation action of Buenos Aires, as mentioned, that is trying to advance citizen science in the social sciences. Our case addresses the lack of environmental justice in the Matanza-Riachuelo Basin, where despite a Supreme Court of Justice sentence mandating a sanitation and recomposition policy, the communities are still affected by environmental problems, social vulnerability, and top-down policy. We will work in exploring these issues through the collaborative design of a platform of citizen-generated information about socio-environmental risk by creating a knowledge coalition and involving members of the communities as co-researchers. As Stefan mentioned, the knowledge coalition is one of the main approaches of the COACT project towards building the communities that will work in the co-design of the research and innovation actions. So, the literature, both international and regional, recognizes the importance of diversity in the production of knowledge for transformation towards sustainable development. In this sense, we believe that the knowledge coalition is the pragmatic approach to defining these communities that will participate and support the development of the project throughout the whole cycle. So as part of the activities that we're doing currently in Buenos Aires for the establishment of the Knowledge Coalition, especially in the context of the lockdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have designed a few activities, including the literature review of previous participatory experiences around knowledge and information production in the basin. To analyze these experiences, we've explored through the literature what are the challenges that are recognized for citizen science projects, and we've tried to identify if similar evidence can be found for these experiences. The challenges that we've addressed are around participation, in terms of how the initiatives dealt with sustaining citizens' engagement, sustainability, that is the difficulties with the availability of resources to support participation exercises, training activities, and tool development, around academic and institutional spheres, tensions regarding the pressures of funding and tenure systems that may not recognize participatory processes as important or relevant for researchers, or the obstacles faced with the formal institutions, and the challenges of validation of the results related to discussions introduced by the participatory processes, outputs, and results in terms of standardization and representativeness. The first case that we've analyzed is the Heydrich Forum in Loma de Zamora, an initiative boosted by local neighbors since the year 2000 to address the consequences of flooding and lack of water and sewage services. Since the year of 2013, the Forum has made contacts and alliances with both universities and different territorial NGOs in order to promote several and conduct several campaigns of popular epidemiology to establish the link between the socio-environmental conditions and the health issues that the population was presenting. The main challenges that we've identified in this case were, in terms of participation, the heterogeneity of participating actors, the urgency of the issues affecting the vulnerable population that didn't allow people to participate in a more engaged way sometimes, the episodic character of the involvement of the participants, and the necessity of actors promoting the alliances to carry forward the campaigns. In terms of sustainability, the dependence on coordinating neighbors. In terms of institutional tensions, the authorities with which the initiative was creating a dialogue was denying the situation. And in terms of the results validation, all the proposed knowledge had to have technical viability, and the evidence had to be accompanied by direct action for its consideration by the authorities.
The second project we analyze is the citizen data platform Que Pasa Riachuelo, or WhatsApp Riachuelo. The idea of this platform was to address the issue of lack of public participation in the implementation of the basin sanitation policy, and was led by the FARN, this NGO, and with the help of independent researchers and activists around the network M7 Red. And the methodology for involving the community was around the monitoring of socio-environmental issues and the different programs addressing those concerns run by the local governments and the national government. And the challenge we identify around participation are the lack of previous knowledge of socio-environmental risk from a proportion of the targeted population, lack of access to technology or difficulties for interacting with the platform, fear of political backlash, need of alliances with local and territorial organizations. Regarding institutional tensions, is the dependence on the public authorities' implementation of solutions to the report. In terms of sustainability, the dependence on external funding, both for the development, update, and maintenance of the platform. And some local and territorial organizations committing to political interest faced limits to promote participatory monitoring. Regarding results validation, the outdated data from public authority around the problematics in the river basin, about pollution, industrial facilities, and so on, and the concerns of potential particular manipulation of the citizen reports coming out from the platform. In the third case, we analyze it's a project which implemented a participatory action research approach through audiovisual methodologies for disaster risk reduction. The initiative was led by researchers. The methodology, as I mentioned, is audiovisual plus qualitative approach. And the challenge we identified regarding participation was the innovative character of the project itself, but especially the audiovisual documentation tools. The gender issues in this term we are referring to the redistribution of care has a limit to participation, especially for women, and the inclusions of expert point of view in this video because they were not used to be recorded. In terms of sustainability, the dependence on external funding, similar to the WhatsApp Riachuelo platform, the academic or institutional challenges were related to the time-demanding methodological training, plus the high cost of video editing process, and principally the lack of support and recognition of this methodological approach in comparison with the paper. In terms of results, validation, these environmental conflicts documenting through these videos are used in the university courses around environmental humanities concerns. And also the grassroots organizations that participate in these videos and this project, they appropriated the videos to raise awareness in their own communities, but also to pressure local government for solutions. The last project we analyzed is the Protocol for Social Responsible Human Resettlement Process. The idea of this initiative was to address the lack of public planification and understanding of what are the impacts of human displacement. The actors leading the initiative were researchers with multiple memberships. We were working in academia, the justice, and/or the public sector. And the methodology we use is the co-design of public policy management tool. In terms of challenge, we identify the innovative multi-stakeholder articulation was a process difficult to guide. And the collective and collaborative writing process also was a challenge. In terms of sustainability, the signature of a special cooperation agreement to run this process, and the complex and administrative framework of financial management. In terms of academic tensions, the lack of explicit evaluation criteria recognizing social impact of research in the tenure and career system, in tension with an existing tradition of Latin American researchers working in design or implementation of public policy. Regarding result validation, the resettlement process protocol was approved and adopted by local governments, also at national level, and by the authority of the Matanza-Riachuelo River Basin to guide and assess this kind of resettlement process in the country, but also was, and maybe it's the most important, it was appropriated by the leaders of the affected communities that participating in the writing and in the co-design process of this management tool for monitoring and negotiation of the displacement conditions. And finally, some challenges in common we identified, and also as Guillermina mentioned, this is a work in process paper. The identified commonalities are around technological barriers. Those projects had more than 10 years, yet definitely nowadays methodologies and innovative tools are different, are more appropriated around in the population. But anyway, still, for example, internet connection is a concern to run some kind of online workshops with these communities. And also, as we mentioned, the external funding and lack of experience of institutional agreements to promote and support these kind of processes. Next steps for us are further systematization of the initiative challenges and inquiry about their solution, and the knowledge coalition workshop to discuss specific challenges for our research and innovative action and the potential of these strategies. By now, this is what we wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is Niclas Hagen speaking, and together with me, I have my co-presenter, Kasperowski, and I think Stefan has already presented us and our affiliations, so I'll jump right into our presentation. Our presentation is called Ethical Boundary Work in Citizen Science, Expulsion, Autonomy, Insufficiency, and Expansion. And the next slide, please, Francesca. Yes, as a background to this paper, I would like to talk about the institutionalization of citizen science. I mean, currently we can see, among other things, that we have a recognition expectation from national and internationally policymakers of the promises of citizen science. We also have seen launching of a specialized journal that is Citizen Science Theory in Practice. We have the establishment of national and international associations, specified calls for citizen science from a variety of funders, and also that citizen science is recognized by such actors as the United Nations. Returning to the headline, we can then ask about what about ethics and citizen science? Next slide, Francesca, please. In this presentation and the underlying paper for these presentations, me and my co-presenter intend to investigate the notion of ethics and citizen science by employing a concept originally developed within the Science and Technology Studies, SDS. And in SDS, the concept of boundary work has been used to conceive of the ways in which scientists collectively defend and demarcate their intellectual territories. That is, that science and scientists are drawing a rhetorical boundary between science and non-science. And within this framework, these theoretical frameworks, there is no essential definition of science. What we have and what we can see is only an ongoing debate and rhetorical standpoints made among actors to create boundaries that include certain practices or actors while excluding others. Next slide, please. Now, if we extend the notion of boundary work into the ethical realm, we have something called ethical boundary work. And when ethics in science is discussed in traditional ways, also through clear-cut cases that are brought forward. In contrast, ethical boundary work stress that if ethical reasoning can be seen as practical, particular, and also ambiguous. There is no essence here, and applying this to the field of citizen science, we mean that ongoing ethical boundary work within citizen science is striving for demarcation lines where actors, practices, and even traditional science are constructed as ethical and unethical. Next slide, please. So in order for us to study the ethical boundary work within citizen science, we have employed a meta study of the field of citizen science, and we have studied publications, citizen science publications in scientific journal. And this qualitative work were initiated by database search, where we searched the web of science and Scopus by using a modified search strings originally developed by Kasperowski and a colleague of ours, Christopher Kullingberg, for a publication in PLOS ONE in 2016. And the search string in our case was modified by including the word ethic. And this database search yielded a number of papers that we went through. We reviewed these manually to exclude duplications between the databases, etc., etc. And we ended up with 141 papers, which we performed a qualitative content analysis upon. And now I will leave the stage for my colleague Vic here, who will talk about the result of this meta study.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Francesca. As Niclas said, this is a qualitative study, and the content analysis of the ethical boundary work employed by researchers in the field of citizen science resulted in 4 themes: expulsion, expansion, autonomy, and insufficiencies. And I will go through them one by one. Next slide, please. Now, citizen science is an old practice, actually with quite a tainted ethical legacy, and expulsion is forming this legacy. Invisibility as expulsion in managing data quality has been done for many years in citizen science, and it still occurs. And that means that citizens or the volunteer contributors are made invisible in certain aspects of the research process, probably in publication, but maybe also earlier, so that the work done by volunteers are not recognized in final publications. And also when data is shared between projects, citizens are not acknowledged for their work. Next, please. Autonomy is another form of ethical boundary work employed by researchers in citizen science. And that is the argument that conventional ethical frameworks in science is outdated, ill-fitting, or needs to be broadened or renewed for citizen science. Conventional research ethics are concerned with the objects of research and the integrity of professional researchers. As you distribute responsibility in the research process to volunteer contributors as active epistemic subject, the question is if you also can distribute ethical responsibility to them. The answer is both yes and no. And citizen science is then put into an ethical void where the possibilities of ethical citizen science is only granted if autonomy from conventional research ethics can be attained, is maintained by several of the researchers in our data. But how this is going to be done is quite uncertain at the moment. Next, please. One of the more pronounced, shall we say, positions in ethical boundary work by authors in the field of citizen science is insufficiency. The insufficiencies of science, actually, science and scientists to be ethically catering for volunteer contributors to perform the tasks that they are employed to do. In cases, this means that the structural conventions of top-down citizen science create unethical conditions, as the goal of such projects does not translate to social goals for participants in research, resulting in exploitation of local communities. Citizens seeking empowerment does not receive the epistemic representation for this empowerment that they expected from science. And top-down citizen science and the empowerment so often enlisted in these types of projects is quite illusionary. Next one, please. Expansion then is the last of these themes of ethical boundary work. Expansion is relying on the thought that science already have ethical frameworks in place, and these are still the best solution, and that these are to be expanded to citizen science alike. However, relying on very thorough training of participants, not always compatible with the mobilization of larger segments of the citizenry. For instance, that volunteer observers are guided and trained in line with the highest standards of social science research practice. This in turn creates a kind of paradox. Then if you want to train them in ethics, you probably lose them quite early in the process. Next one, please. So this produces some paradoxes in the field of citizen science when it concerns ethics. And there are more than these ones, of course. You're solving one problem, maybe, but you are always creating a new one, it seems. For instance, if you rely on the heavy information and training of participants in research ethics, you probably will end up with a problem of exploiting them, and they will leave the project early on. But the main thing here is that the practice of volunteers and making that practice invisible creates a paradox for the field at large, since we are now constructing this field as democratizing science with highly visible participants. There are more, of course, in the paper below, and you can just reach out to us for a preprint of this. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes, you can all hear me? Then I'll jump directly into my presentation. And as I've already been presented, I'll just briefly talk about the context of my study. My fellowship forms part of our museum, which is a national research and development project that facilitates new forms of citizen engagement by designing and studying how museums interact with the public in innovative ways. As part of this program, I collaborate with the Center for Macroecology, Evolution and Climate around a citizen science project, The Sound of Denmark. The Sound of Denmark is also the empirical focus of my PhD project. It enables citizens to participate in mapping the Danish soundscape and contribute to the collection, processing and classification of sound data with a mobile app in collaboration with researchers from the Center for Macroecology. So citizens, they help scientists to identify sound sources and noise levels in the Danish soundscape, as well as examining relationships between biological and man-made sounds. So they are tagging sound files and contributing with raw data, which is used for training an artificial program, or for training a machine learning program that will eventually automate the sound analysis. In this context, the PhD project, it co-designs, implements, and evaluates a mobile app with an interactive app that citizens can apply with their mobile devices to geolocate, generate, and share the urban and rural sound files from around the country. The objective of the PhD project is achieved by examining how citizen science communication is designed, implemented, and evaluated by involving citizens as co-designers in the design process in order to strengthen citizenship. So what I'm studying here? I'm studying how new forms of citizen science communication are to be designed, implemented, and evaluated in the Sound of Denmark in order to advance civic capacities. And this is also the paper I will go more into the next is a part of this process, is a part of the evaluation process. The evaluation of the implemented design, which means that I'm following participants' communication across the mobile app, that is, which communication is unfolding on Facebook groups and the mobile app, but also the dialogue between citizens and communicators on mail. And the paper I've contributed with tries to address how digital technologies and AI systems in citizen science affect, constrain, and transform citizens' practices, knowledge relations, and consequently the very process of public engagement in scientific research. As I mentioned, the data corpus I work with is based on an ongoing evaluation process. So it's based on my ethnographic studies of the dialogical interactions between citizens and also the citizens and scientists across the entire Sound of Denmark's communication channels, you can say that. So that is what happens in the dialogical forum, mail correspondence, and Facebook groups. And what we can see is an an epistemic culture in its early becoming, participants that contribute in different ways, doing listening, recording, mapping sounds, classifying sounds, tagging, deleting, remapping sounds, and so forth. And they also share and discuss these sounds in the discussion forum. My findings demonstrate that communication with participants is vital to acknowledge their matters of concern when they have questions, want to contribute with personal sound archives, but also when they use own microphones to improve their sound recordings or experience technical issues they can solve themselves. But also we see how technological issues like poor audio quality, incorrect AI feedback, and the entire project protocol are actually excluding certain forms of sonic engagement. I have an example with the amateur scientist who wants to contribute with high quality sound data, but he's not allowed to because the machine learning program is trained on low quality sound data. So he can't really use it. So he's actually excluded in participating in the project because he's not interested in contributing with sound that is not of high quality. But we also found that it's not the amateur recorders, it's not exclusive in the passion for sound practices. Other participants equally expressed their concern about poor audio quality and incorrect AI feedback. And all of this somehow restrict the ways of participating in the project. Our findings suggest that participants want to do better and participate on their own terms, but the app and protocols, they actually limit the engagement. Participants are not simply excluded as a result of constraints and technological issues, but because they want to improve data quality. Consequently, participants, they start to create their own programs, anti-programs, and practices by using, for instance, using their own microphone to improve sound quality and AI feedback, even though this intervenes with the overall project protocol. So this is also a way for them to express their concern for the project's research and the data quality. Unintentionally, they create a sphere of conflict, negotiation, and possibility. Taken together, the current app design is actually excluding people and practices from the projects. Its affordances and protocols are shaping and nurturing specific conditions for listening. In other words, they are actually shaping and producing a certain kind of epistemic subjects. And we could say that the overall project is also defining not only what we hear, but also what we allow ourselves to hear. And potentially they also exclude a plurality of different voices. So my argument is that this calls for a turn in the way we design responsible citizen science and new questions to be asked to avoid these present modes of exclusion. How can we design sonic engagement that fosters new conditions for dialogue, democratic action, and ethical engagement? What I suggest is that it's important to listen to citizens' matters of concern. For instance, that we design for dialogical interaction, we design possibilities for people to ask questions and go dialogue with researchers, but also with each other. And it's important to listen to the citizens of different reasons, as I mentioned. Because what we see is people that can't really contribute or participate as they wish, they start to create these anti-programs. They try to invent or do their own practices. And the same thing happens when they get incorrect feedback or they have technological issues. It's actually it constrains and excludes the different ways of participating. So what we have to do is try to look at these anti-programs, also like they create these conflicts and also possibilities for actually creating or establishing new ways of collaborating, design collaborations. And that's what I've been trying to do in my project, co-designing with citizens, and try to embrace these situational or uncertain situations that also opens up for different potentials, because citizens, they bring a lot of different things to the table. For instance, imagination and attention to different matters of concern, care, responsibility. So we have to think about what is it, what kind of projects are we actually designing? Is it projects that is serving the researchers, or are we actually trying to develop projects that also create like a critical voice in the public? But to do this, we have to open up for closer collaboration from the early start in the projects. Yes, I think that was the last words.
Okay. So the original idea was that I present now my paper that I prepared together with David Scheller, 7 Principles for Citizen Social Science, next. And unfortunately, I messed up a little bit the time in the beginning. Could you enter now the PowerPoint presentation? Great, thank you very much. Yeah. But we will have a Zoom conference afterwards, and then we can discuss all the different questions, and we have a little bit more time. So you are invited to attend the Zoom conference. We would be really glad to have a little bit more time for discussion. Okay, my topic is 7 Principles of Citizen Social Science. David and I want to propose in this paper 7 Principles of a Citizen Social Science. This should not be a substitution of or an opposition to, but more amendments to the original 10 Principles of Citizen Science. Our ambition is to initiate a discussion about principles that are specific for researching social science topics. We consider this establishing discussion about the question if we should add social science-related principles to concretize the more general 10 principles of citizen science. We argue in this paper, yes, we should do so. The reason is that we think that those principles will help to clarify the ambitions of citizen science when it comes to collaborative research projects on topics relevant for social sciences. Therefore, this paper functions as a call for initiating a discussion about the methodological peculiarities of citizen social science. My first point is that I want briefly, I want to start with a quick overview of the 10 principles of citizen science. This should function as a starting reference point for the development of further principles specific for social science. The EXA working group on sharing best practice and building capacity citizen science outlined in the year 2015 10 principles of citizen science that were broadly discussed in the citizen science community. They cover a whole range of crucial aspects. I have to switch my slide. Yeah, these are the 10 principles of citizen science. First, citizen involvement in research is important. Second, a focus on a science outcome. Yeah, that's really scientific work with an outcome. Third, both sides, citizens and scientists, must be able to benefit. Fourth, participation in the difference is important. Fifth, the importance of giving feedback to citizens. Sixth, projects must follow a scientific approach. Seventh, a devotion to open science aids acknowledgement of citizens' science, evaluation is important, and consideration of legal and ethical issues. That's only as a brief overview about the 10 principles, so that we have them on our mind. The intention of the 10 principles are to provide guidelines which underlies good practices in citizen science regardless of the academic discipline or cultural context in which it is applied. A citation from Robinson and other scholars from 2018. A further concretization of these principles can be found in the discussion paper Excess Characteristics of Citizen Science. The paper is a mix of a best practice guideline and a science policy paper recently published by Heckley et al. 2020. The necessity to consider disciplinary aspects, especially of social science and the humanities, are indeed mentioned there, but not clarified yet in the community, I would add. Against this background, we want to discuss reasons why a consideration of further principles that are specific and adequate to social science project is important. So that brings me to the next slide. I just want to give you present a few arguments to the question, what is special about citizen social science? A long-standing philosophical debate on the theory of science deals with the particularities of social science and humanities. According to Margöbel Urban Boland, besides a quantitative approach to objectify the nature and social reality of the world, citizen social science must consider the qualitative approach as relevant as well. Qualitative research does not mean more quality, more depth, or just a better method, but the qualitative approach is a necessarily complementary method to a mere quantitative counting and measuring of the empirical world. Qualitative methods are more about talking with people, participation in their life worlds, and deliberatively discussing topics and issues that are relevant to them. Oh, sorry. It's a wrong button. So, the methodological foundation of this qualitative approach can be found in the hermeneutics. The most important consequence for our discussion of 7 principles of a citizen social science is that we have to add a second approach to social reality. Beyond the quantitative counting and measuring, it is about understanding and interpretation of the social world, of social, cultural meaning, subjective sense-making practices, and so on. What does understanding and interpretation as scientific methods mean? To clarify this, let me stay with our research topic of gender inequalities, which we examined together with citizens as one of the 4 research actions in the COAC project. The core of my scientific proposition of theory cannot be in social science the number, the 9 or the 10. In my example, 9 out of 10 people agree that society is characterized by gender inequalities. Yeah, probably you can find this in a study. The cultural understanding of gender inequalities cannot be objectified in a way by just transforming this into numbers. Contrary to this, in a social science project, we have to clarify first the social cultural meaning of topics like gender, inequalities, power relationships. The reason for this is that the research topics in social science are already defined in the social world by people, culture, and society. Therefore, we must start a research project in social science by gaining an understanding of the everyday life concepts of citizens. And I call these concepts interpretation of first orders according to Alfred Schütz. We do this in social science as I outlined before by talking with people, discussing the topics and participating in the life world. Against this, we do not have the hermeneutic problem of understanding in natural science, because the classification of the brightness of a star's universe or the number of birds does not affect in any way and is not affected by the way that stars or birds conceptualize themselves. And this is different in social science when we do research together with citizens. Finally, we can build our second order interpretation as scientific concepts on the first order interpretations of the life world. We can come up with a systematic, coherent definition of topics such as gender equalities, but in a neat relationship to the first order relationships. And in the end, we are even capable to collect and analyze quantitative data. So it is highly interesting that 9 of 10 people agree to the item that society is characterized by gender inequalities. So, and that leads me to the last point. The consequence of this argumentation, we want to propose 7 principles to clarify and concretize the ambitions of citizen social science. First, citizen social science focuses beyond the objective givenness on the social construction of social reality that requires interpretation and understanding of social cultural meaning, communication, and social action. And for this, I already gave arguments before. The second point is, and that all derives from the first point now. So the second point is citizen social science. Science takes citizen social concerns issues at its main thematic focal point. The reason for this is that if citizens research social topics, then they are not neutral to them, but they are related to but those topics are related to their needs, interests, and wishes. So they have an interest in all these topics so that they become social content issues. Third, citizen social science aims at practical relevance of the produced knowledge that have social impact and envisions social change. I would argue towards the third point, if the research topic has an immediate relevance for the research participants, then also the results should have social impact to envision a better world. Fourth, citizen social science considers citizen participation as a key feature of all stages of the research process. And the reason is that if we research topics that are already predefined and pre-interpreted by citizens as first order interpretations, then we should consider the deep participation, the say, and the perspective in the research process as important. The fifth point is citizen social science sets up communicative spaces for mutual exchange and understanding in the knowledge coalition. The reason is that participation is realized by discussing the meaning, sense, and relevance of the research topics together with the citizens. So we need communication, we need communicative practices to get these first order interpretations. And 6, citizen social science should draw from social science theories and methods. The reason is we should take advantage from the huge stock of knowledge, theories, and methods already developed in social science. And the last point, 7, citizen social science is particularly aware of the ethical responsibilities to reflect and to prevent power disbalances and to include the diversity of perspectives, local knowledges, and worldviews. And that was the final point, and we have especially as citizen scientists a certain responsibility to consider these ethical responsibilities as highly relevant if we do research with citizens. So that is what I wanted to present it here. Time is always restricted. I skipped a little bit of my presentation so that we have a little bit more time. Thanks for your interest. And so, yeah, 2 minutes left. Yeah, probably the best way would be that we meet again in the Zoom conference. I started to collect all the questions that you asked in the chat, and probably we can go back to all these questions and by using the Zoom link that you see on the top of the slide. Thank you very much. Okay. Hi, guys.